All right. Hello, professionals. My name is Rico Aladdin, and I am the founder of Professional Launch. Today is one of the episode from our AI podcast series, and I am so grateful to have Dr. Ann Denton from NDSU here to talk about. Ready? You ready? Not all AI are created equal. That's the title for today. So thank you for tuning in, Dr. Ann Denton. Thank you for being on Professional Launch today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Please tell the professional launch audience a little bit about yourself.
So I'm at North Dakota State University
Mhm.
in the computer science department. I'm a professor there. I teach social implications of computers. It's still relatively recent, so for the past 4 years I've been doing that. For the past 25 years I've been teaching databases and things related to lots of data and other computer science kinds of topics.
Mhm.
But recently, the question of what are actually the impacts of what we're doing has gotten to be more at the forefront of what I'm interested in. And of course, those past 4 years have shown such a rise in AI related topics that, yeah, we are quite, quite affected by that. And it makes it even more exciting.
Well, okay, wonderful. So today we're trying to understand AI. AI's diversity. So how do different types of AI, like generative AI, machine learning, and deep learning, compare in their capabilities?
So there are a number of ways in which you can classify different AI
Mhm.
algorithms. One of the distinctions that I sometimes think is underappreciated is the distinction between neural AI and symbolic AI. So, just as an example, symbolic AI is an example of what you could do with that. Would be um, if you have information like Alice is a parent of Bob and Bob is a parent of Chris, and then you ask, well, who? And you know that a parent of a parent is a grandparent, and you then ask, well, who are the grandparents of Chris? You would find out that Alice is a grandparent of Chris. This is the sort of thing that you can do with a Prolog programming language, which we, for many years or decades, we've taught as an AI programming language. It's something completely different from neural AI. So the ChatGPT and the um, a lot of what has been discussed in the last few years is based on neural networks. So neural networks, they try to really simulate the brain. And neural networks have been around for decades as well. They've been used in different contexts. They've been used in machine learning, um, but they've always been a completely different way of thinking about it. And one way to think of this is like what happens in our brain. So in our brain, we have neurons. Um, Neural networks are supposed to simulate that, but also in our brain, we have this language center. And in the language center, that's where we can talk about language, uh, grammar of sentences, and logical things like the question of what's a grandparent and who is a grandparent of whom. So in our brain we have this language center that works with symbolic kinds of reasoning. A lot of math is in that symbolic area, but we also have a lot of intuitive thinking. So the 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 right side of our brain is mostly that intuitive neural network type of thinking, and I think it really matters to understand which artificial intelligence is which, because if you go back, even in the 50s, there were chess programs. They weren't particularly good, but they would never once make an incorrect move. You had ChatGPT. Within a short time, people gave it chess problems. It did quite well from the get go, but 15 moves in, it would make these random moves that completely break the rules of chess. Even back in the 50s, you would never have had a case where a chess program broke the rules. And that's because ChatGPT is a neural algorithm. It does not have the logic of the chess game hard coded into it.
Hmm.
And when people talk in general terms about AI does this, AI can that, and it always rubs me the wrong way because I mean, which AI are you talking about? There's some AIs for which, pretty much for any statement you can make about AI, there are some AIs for which it's true and some for which it's not.
Hmm. Okay. So, can you elaborate on that? Are there fundamental differences in how AI models are being seen or trained, or you know?
Yeah, so neural AI, um, you give it a lot of data,
Mhm.
and uh, you need data for any neural network. And so the neural networks of the 80s, 90s, you would just give them some training data. You would say, well, if this is your input, this is your output, and then um, you would feed that in, and then depending on whether the outcome was right, you would move back through the network. It's called a backpropagation algorithm. And Jeffrey Hinton, who just won the Nobel Prize for Physics for neural networks, he was one of the people who developed this backpropagation algorithm, and that would then adjust all the weights in those between those neurons. And if you went back through the network for each of those test cases, you would train it, and then eventually your network would be trained in a way so it would give the right answers. That's sort of the classic way of neural networks. Um, the current ones, the ChatGPT, they don't. They have several levels, so they're called deep neural networks for that reason, because they don't just have one hidden layer; they've got several levels. So it gets a little more complicated then. But the logic is still, there are weights, and those weights get adjusted. And if you feed it enough data, then you can adjust the weights in a way that it will answer what you want it to answer. Um, with symbolic AI, that often isn't the case at all. So, for example, for these prologue questions that I mentioned, with the where you have logic resolution, like who is a grandparent of whom,
Mhm.
you feed the AI everything that you want it to know, and it will never break out of what you have given it as logic relationships. And this distinction is it's sort of funny that the first um, artificial intelligence um, psychiatrist, there was a program called Eliza back in, I think, the 60s already.
Mhm.
Um, it You would tell it something, and it would ask you questions, and then you would give it answer. It would answer your um, what you told it, and would keep the conversation going. And people said, "Oh, this is artificial intelligence," but it was completely on that symbolic side. Everything Eliza could say was pre-programmed. I mean, you could sometimes it could assemble something, it could put something into a token, but everything was pre-programmed.
Mm.
There was no external data. There was no place where it could just suddenly go off the rails. All the uh, keeping keeping bounds on the AI, everything that we're saying now, it's because we are giving it arbitrary amount of data.
Mhm.
Um, you can have a chatbot respond. I mean, okay, admittedly, it wasn't very good, but but people were impressed at the time, and all it did was to take your input, go through one if uh, decision, and then present the output. I actually had in high school, I had a friend who programmed the entire code for Eliza from a printout in a computer science magazine.
Mm.
So that was we had fun with it then, and it's a long time ago.
Yeah, so I'm curious as I'm asking you these questions right now, I'm thinking of how my conversation with other folks about AI, and in your opinion, can you explain the distinction between open source AI and proprietary AI systems?
Oh, yeah, that is a very important one. I mean, so the general distinction, of course, between open source and proprietary is that it's not so much about whether it's free, but it's about whether you can change it yourself. And
Mm.
and the open source, I think, with AI that has caused less confusion than with some other software. But um, yeah, the OpenAI initially wanted to keep the code. Um, Yeah, well, they wanted to be open about the process, but there have been different players um, who leave the most complete open source right now is what Facebook made available. So the idea is uh, the more people can see the code, the more bugs will be found, and also the more new development um, there will be. And with so specific to AI, I think the thinking for a long time was it doesn't really matter as much because you need so much data and you need so much compute power that even if you did make the code open source, there still wouldn't be small players who could do much with it. Um, and I mean these models are really gigantic. So even the BERT model that Google uses, um, that um, isn't even doing
Mhm.
what OpenAI's ChatGPT does. Um, Already just training that model once at one point took about as much energy as a transcontinental flight. And this is not one person on an airplane, this is the whole airplane.
Mhm.
So those models are gigantic. And I think for a long time, it was sort of that sense, well, um, there are benefits in open source. I mean, everybody has understands those. I mean, the question of open source, of course, goes way back. And there are the open source operating systems like Linux, um, which coincidentally actually is used by almost all web servers. So open source has had some huge advantages. But there's a difference between, are we talking about an operating system or are we talking about um, an AI framework where you need basically the energy of a transatlantic or transcontinental flight? Not everybody has the resources to for that, and it's both the chips. I mean, NVIDIA chips are the ones that have been uh, the most driving chips to driving that innovation. And if you need thousands of those, I mean, how many people can really afford that? How many small companies does it really matter?
Mhm.
Of course, as we just learned about a week ago, that has changed dramatically because now there is the DeepSeek um, company that has been able to create a very competitive AI with just a fraction of the number of chips that all the other companies had needed. Which I mean, I think supports this idea that um, once some code is available, um, there are suddenly players who can make important progress um, in ways that you might not even have anticipated.
Hmm. So, based on what you were saying earlier, I understand there are many different AI models. Is that right? Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So, one thing that that's a question I think might be for also for business people. Who is responsible for ensuring that AI models are, I don't know, fair, are fair? Is it the developers or is it the companies or policymakers?
Well, that's a $1 million question, right? That was the goal of OpenAI, that
Mhm,
they would be the ones who would be develop the models that would take social implications very seriously, and that they would not just press ahead without considering those
mhm,
implications. And well, when push came to shove, and the board actually wanted to uh, make clear to Sam Altman that he was pushing too fast and not considering the implications enough. Um, when was that? November 23, I think, when they made him step down, and then yeah, took well, they basically fired him from the top position, from the CEO position, and then, but then Microsoft offered not just Sam Altman, but everybody in the company
mhm,
a job, and that then made that action completely backfire, with the result that Sam Altman got his job back. Everybody else who wanted to stay stayed, except the people who had the most uh, pushed back against Sam Altman, which included, coincidentally, the only two women on the OpenAI board, um, Helen Toner and um, Tricia McCauley. They were not they were pushed off the board.
mhm,
They were the ones who were most um, pushing for socially conscious innovations. So the answer is, not only is there no external control when companies try to control AI through their board, um, it can still fail because the financial interests may be more powerful than whatever even a board of a company like OpenAI can do.
mm,
Um, and yeah, because in that case it was the backing by a completely different company,
mm.
not completely different. Microsoft had been involved in funding um, ChatGPT, but um, but yeah, it was their guarantee that gave the ousted CEO actually more power than the board that had ousted him.
Hmm.
So no, there is no sort of. I mean, of course, everybody underlies the laws of the country they're in. So how much laws can be broken? There are some mechanisms there, but there is not really anything that is specific to AI, and especially considering the vast change in the landscape of AI.
Mm.
There are a lot of people who are very concerned about this, including, by the way, um, Jeffrey Hinton, who I mentioned, who just got the Nobel Prize for neural networks, um, for physics, because of his work in neural networks. He has been so concerned by the situation that he actually quit his job with Google, because he felt that if he were to work within a company in this landscape, he couldn't be as open as he would be otherwise. So he quit his job so he could be more open. but still he's just one voice, and even a Nobel laureate. I
Mhm.
mean, what is one independent voice if a company board can't do it, and a Nobel laureate can't do it? I mean, there are a lot of concerns about this.
Wonderful. So, we just um, how do those models differ in, let's say, accessibility or usability for? Because you mentioned this, at least some of them. How do some of these models that you described earlier differ in accessibility and usability for some generations?
So, I mean, definitely from the computer scientist perspective,
Hmm.
we've when a model is open source, we can use it more easily. We can work with it more easily, adjust it more easily. Um, than with ChatGPT. So that we in our research, I have a student who works with the Llama model of the open source um, model, so that can help in doing research, even at the university level. I mean, we're not going to be the next deep seek. It's not even what we're trying to do. But when you have a model completely available, it does help in the academic research. I think that's the main beneficiary sort of open source software. The academic community can help develop things, and small companies can. And I mean, I think it's always important not to underestimate what the academic community can do. Um, it was about 20 years ago when Netflix had this $1 million competition where they promised $1 million to the first team that could create a better algorithm for predicting what a person would like to view, which is also machine learning.
Hmm.
And I talked with some people. I was sort of on the periphery of. I never really tried to compete in that competition, but I was at conferences where some other groups did that, and I heard from somebody who said that Netflix was actually surprised that within a month or so they had predicted that it would take the academic community several months until they would catch up with what Netflix had done internally, but then they would do much, much better. And that actually, in that case, wasn't really what happened. I mean, you have this exponential curve often when with startups that they expect to gain a lot soon, and then but in reality it takes a long time, and then they gain a lot. But with the academic research, the opposite happened. Within a month, the academic community actually had improved over what Netflix could do. But then they didn't get orders of magnitude better, and the algorithms that they came up with were a collection of a lot of specialized
Hmm.
algorithms. Um, that's what eventually won um, that Netflix competition. There was one algorithm that really was quite new and innovative, but there was also a lot of specialized things that were happening. And again, that I mean that goes back to your earlier question.
Hmm.
Yeah, there are a lot of very specialized algorithms in every aspect of this, and they all have their own risks and benefits.
Mm. Okay, so uh, that's bring me to the part that I wanted to ask. I've been asking this question for a while. I mean myself this question for a while? Do you think that some AI model, uh, uh, some AI models benefit certain group of people while being a disadvantage to others?
Oh, I think that is. I mean, there have been entire books written about that. The weapons of math destruction
Hmm.
is one that shows a whole book about all the places where um, people get hurt by this, and it's usually machine learning. So a lot of the I guess there isn't as much research yet about the ChatGPT type of generative AI impact on society, but there's a lot of research about how machine learning, so
Mhm.
just often just the yes no questions, how they affect um, society. One of the examples from that Weapons of Math Destruction book that sort of stuck with me was a teacher who lost her job because um, the school system went entirely based on whether a teacher was able um, to improve scores on standardized tests for the students. And there was this one teacher where the students didn't, so it was an automated thing. And then she was out, and later it turned out that the teacher the previous year had cheated, and had the students had the previous year the students had better grades than what they actually knew. So the point being, and then that teacher was hired by a private school that didn't just have this one dimensional kind of evaluation. So there are, when you let things be evaluated automatically, um, you're losing some of the broad view of what's going on.
Mhm.
So and with AI, that's almost always the case, right? I mean, you if you feed something into a machine learning algorithm, I there are lots of stories out there that I give to my students in the social implications class. The person who didn't get pain medication anymore because an algorithm said that she was a likely drug abuser, drug user. Um, it turned out that she just happened to also have a dog who also needed
Mm.
pain medication, and between her own pain medication and the dog's pain medication, the algorithm had somehow decided that she fit the drug use um, picture. And so there are when you rely on AI decisions, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. I mean, of course, ideally, you think um, a fairer algorithm should, if an automated algorithm isn't going to have the biases of people. And I mean, in fairness, if you walk into a bank and ask for a loan, yeah, sure, people will be profiled. I mean, and as a woman, I can say there are a lot of studies that say that if a woman walks into a used car or even new car dealership, she'll probably pay more than than men will.
Mhm.
So there are all these sorts of biases with even with human intelligent negotiation. And there's the hope that AI wouldn't fall prey to that. And yes, with AI, you can cut off any attribute that you don't want to have. If you don't want to have gender, you don't consider gender. If you
Mhm.
don't have, and so on. So um, the problem is there are a lot of secondary indicators of something. And the example I like to give is that um, even if you don't have gender, well, if you still have, for example, as a resume information in there, resumes with gaps. When I started as a professor, there was a meeting among female professors, and I talked with others. They all had gaps in their resumes.
Mhm.
And it was not necessarily always child raising. It might have been care for elderly. It might have been just being a trailing spouse. So gap in a resume is something that is a proxy for gender. And the first algorithms for at one point they found that an algorithm at Amazon for hires would just completely not hire women.
Mm.
And that was, I mean, it wasn't programmed into it. They probably didn't even use gender, but because of these proxies, there are fairness in AI is a topic in itself. And no matter how you approach it, in fact, you can show that you cannot make an algorithm be fair according even just the three most basic uh, criteria for fairness.
Hmm. Well, so that I have, it's thinking about it. I know that AI might benefit developed countries better than developing countries, right? Same idea as fairness. For there are some people that some groups they can benefit more, and some group can be a disadvantage, right? And so, as you look at the future now, as you are thinking about the future of AI, different AI models, so how do you see, or what advice would you give to some groups or some businesses on how they can use certain AI models depending on the industry to improve their business or to improve their professional developments?
Yeah, so there again many facets to that. So in terms of things like fairness, um, they definitely would want to look into that discussion as well. There are entire textbooks about fairness in AI. There are issues with privacy in AI. So privacy is a huge issue too when you um, because so much of the most of the new AI does require data. You can't assume that it's going to be fair.
Do some invade your privacy more than others?
Absolutely. I mean, what their policies are. Um, yes, absolutely. Different companies are going. Well, that is more of a policy of more of a question of the policy of the company. What they consider appropriate? Do they, for example, use data that is collected for one purpose? If they use it for something else, that's always a red flag. But there
Hmm.
are certainly companies that do it. Um, I would say, in terms of the modern AIs, most of them use data. So at that point, it's not as much a question of um, does the AI use data. The ones like I mentioned earlier, like the ELIZA and the Prolog programs. I mean, they still exist, but they usually the, if they are part of a AI system, it would just be a small part. It wouldn't be the entire thing most of the time. So at that point, it's a question of what is the policy of the company more than what is the AI. Well, no, I guess um, you can. So the broad groups of AI, the symbolic and the um, and the neural. Well, among the neural AIs, they all use external data. You can take the choice to apply fairness principles, or you can take the choice of not doing it. Um, as a person being concerned about this, I would recommend that companies do use fairness. Um, of course, whether that actually helps their bottom line. I mean, the reason why people don't use fairness criteria is when they feel it doesn't help their bottom line, and that's and then there are political questions. I mean, this is a very difficult a question to answer at this point in time. We just last week were told we uh, could not access federal funds anymore if anything in our research said that we were trying to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion. This week, it looks like we still can, but maybe not for much longer. So saying to somebody who is working towards implementing AI in their business, use fairness principles for equity considerations. Well, it's a political question whether you want to do it or not.
Yeah.
They exist. You can do it. There is the literature. So that um, way. So maybe I think actually the single answer to your question is what I tell my students all the time in social implications. Instead of trying to come up with a reasoned answer. Rather spend your time on looking at different perspectives. Look at what are your customers actually going to think. I
Mhm.
mean, it may be you may think you can take it for granted that your customers want the best buck for their input. It might be that you have customers who care. If you have customers who care about fairness, you want to be sure that your policies reflect your values.
Mhm.
So try and gain these different perspectives, the perspectives of the customers, the perspectives of people who are affected by what you're selling, the perspectives and future perspectives too. I mean, if you build an AI now that is entirely focused on wealth, but 5 years down the road, you realize that what you did was in some way not sustainable. That's not good for you. That's not good for your customers. You do want to keep in mind that 5 years down the road, hopefully every company still has a future.
Mhm.
You don't want to saw off the branch you're sitting on. So with when picking AI support, there are a lot of choices you can make. There are a lot of choices about are you concerned with fairness? Are you concerned with copyright? One of the things that until ChatGPT really came out, and ironically, my students actually told me this before it ChatGPT came out. The um, Midjourney image generative AI
Mhm.
came out before ChatGPT came out, and I had a student in class who was quite adamant that artists had their work be used in ways that violated common sense of copyright. And I remember we had before ChatGPT came out already, we had a classroom discussion prompted by that student. Normally, I'm the one who suggests the question. In that case, it was a student who suggested the question. We had a great discussion. Should can artificial intelligence grab imagery from the internet without getting consent?
Hmm.
Half a year later, Hollywood writers went on strike on that very issue. So I felt really privileged that I had students who already knew what was going to happen half a year later,
Hmm.
just out of their own experiences. So if you are a business person and you're not aware of these potential copyright issues, well, you don't want to have people walk out on a strike, right?
Yeah.
Understanding fairness issues can save you from trouble later.
Wonderful. Um, my goodness, this is what you just said. Really, really, really kind of sealed the conversation because we were talking about earlier how businesses can use different models to help their customers. And one thing I think this I want this podcast to be is not only to help people who have business, but also to help young professionals. Right, this is a good transition to it. So if right now, how would you suggest that students, young professionals, use different models of AI to their advantage?
So the one thing I think is really important to keep in mind
Hmm.
is that you cannot the reasoning portions, and there is a lot happening right now too, but the generative AI is not primarily targeted at reasoning. So if you want to be sure that your AI is good at reasoning, you have to really check in detail that that is actually something the AI is intended to do. The earlier generative AI did not do that. So you when using AI, be really careful that it actually has the capability of what you want to use it for. But then also um, check the social implications and things like never use if you want to use AI, for example, in writing, you have to um, disclose that. So be careful not to use AI in illegitimate ways, um, and using it in, for example, if you submit something written, you may have to disclose it, how the situation is in companies, whether you can. Um, whether and I mean you may be more targeted at um, if it's your own business, it might not matter as much. But if you're working for another business or with another business, you need to know what that business accepts. So, I mean, one of the common uses in computer science, of course, is programming. ChatGPT and um, similar generative AI, they can help you write computer code,
Mhm.
but to what extent a business you're working with accepts that, that depends on the business, and you have to be really, really careful that you don't break the rules of the business you're working with. Um, we actually at NDSU we're spending a lot of time on discussing what do we consider the best practices, developing documents about the best practices. So one of the recommendations I would definitely want to share is that anybody who wants to use AI and is concerned about whether that's ethical, legal, and so on, look for the most up to date um, guidance that you can find online, because it's such a fluid situation.
Mm.
You don't want to break any rules.
Yeah, wonderful, Dr. Denton. Thank you so much for being on Professional Lunch today. So, this is part of our AI podcast series, and some of the listeners who ask me to put together this AI series. They actually did me a great deal of a big favor there, because I'm learning so much from all of you who come on to talk about it. And as we are going to be posting this conversation, I'm pretty sure those listeners will learn a lot more too. So thank you so much for being on Professional Lunch today.
Thank you for
Mm,
inviting me. It was great to be here.
wonderful. Now, as a reminder, Professional Lounge is a nonprofit organization. We rely on former guests, on friends, on partners to keep the podcast going. If you like the content that we are putting out on a weekly basis, please support the podcast. And as you know, if you follow us, you know that we are developing a mentoring platform to connect college students with experienced mentors in the community. And so your support will go a long way. We thank you in advance for supporting Professional Launch. Now, this is the part that I tell you it's up to you to make today a great day. Have a great day. Dr. Denton, thank you.